Dark Souls 3 is a game that gave me an eye-opening experience the first time I played it. It's a game that is personally in my top 5 games of all time. With its beautiful locations, difficult but fair bosses, a deep story, and near-perfect game design. It's no surprise that I and many others love this game and have put many hours into it. The game has a clear skill progression as well as skill expression, but my first impression with the game, while a good one, was stained by its difficulty. Elden Ring was a game that I played previous to Dark Souls 3, and Elden Ring borrows a lot from Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring both fall under the genre of Souls games, a genre that consists of difficult action role-playing games. This genre also has a huge emphasis on bosses. Being made by the same company, From Software, Elden Ring is undeniably similar in game design, but there's a clear difference between the two that Elden Ring considered when making the decision to appeal to more people: the difficulty. If you've heard of Elden Ring, you might know that it's a pretty tough game. The locations are filled with formidable enemies, the sheer number of bosses in the game are overwhelming, and if you truly want to learn how to improve your skill, you have to put in the hours. Elden Ring has a plethora of features that help the player overcome its various challenges, such as summoning previous enemies you've defeated to help you, summoning online players, and many more. Dark Souls 3 has almost none of these. Sure, you can summon online players in, but other than that, there's really nothing else. So in result, the game relies solely on your skill level instead of having items and other things help you throughout the game like Elden Ring does. Dark Souls 3 begins with you being awakened in the Cemetery of Ash. This area serves as a tutorial for the player, with enemies scattered around and messages on the floor telling you how to play the game. The further you go into the area, you find a bonfire, which is a checkpoint for the player, so when they die, they respawn at the bonfire they rested at. Even further into the area, you find what looks to be like an arena. And of course, when you see something that is somewhat has the resemblance of a boss arena, you already know that there's a boss ahead. And you would be correct, as you face Udex Gundyr, a tall warrior with a spear-like weapon. Gundyr is one of the most fair bosses in the game, and if you've played Elden Ring, you'll have no trouble with this boss. He has very weighty attacks, but he is also fast and relentless. You feel the ego boost of defeating a Dark Souls boss as you start to get the hang of the game. You go further and find the Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine is a hub where there are a lot of friendly people to talk to, and you can buy things from them. One of the first people you meet is the Firekeeper, who you go to level up. To level up, you need souls, which you can get from defeating enemies, and seeing as you just defeated the first boss, Udex Gundyr, you have enough souls to level up a couple times. Firelink is a great location because it's a place to get away from all the chaos and just chill out. Now the difficulty starts rolling in when you make your way to the next location, the High Wall of Lothric. While the very start of the game is fairly easy, it gives you a false sense of what is to come. The High Wall of Lothric is an area at the base of Lothric Castle, an enormous castle that towers over you as you walk through the area. And at the start of the game, the area seems fine. The fear starts when you find zombie-like enemies, named Hollows, collapsed on the ground. They look like they've gone crazy, and their appearance doesn't help. Suddenly, some of them get up and start screaming at you. They run towards you and try to fight you. The entirety of the High Wall of Lothric is basically a cruel funhouse. You wander around aimlessly, not knowing where to go and what to do, and the plethora of enemies around every corner limits you from making progress. A lot of the early game areas and some of the mid to late game areas are like this. Enemies plague the entire area and the path of where to go isn't clear. The boss at the end of the area is Vort of the Boreal Valley. He is much harder than Udex Gundyr, and for some, this could be your first truly difficult boss. This is when you finally see what you'll be doing in many of the mid to late game areas. Respawn, run over to the boss arena, die, repeat. At first, it isn't that bad, but later in the game, it becomes exhausting. But you may be thinking that this game design is ultimately flawed. Wouldn't it be boring and exhausting to keep fighting the same boss over and over again, dying each and every time? Well, yes, sometimes it is, and it's why some people quit the game before even beating it. They get stuck on a boss, try to beat it over and over again, then give up. So why is this game so good then, if it almost encourages people to quit. Why would it be praised by so many people if it tries to make you fail? That's when you look at it in a different perspective. The first actually difficult boss I faced in my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3 is the Abyss Watchers, the third boss. I just kept throwing myself at the boss and felt like I was going nowhere, but instead of quitting, I realized what the game is trying to do. Instead of Elden Ring, where the game gives you the resources to defeat a boss, Dark Souls 3 doesn't have this. So the only thing that can help is your skill. It teaches you that the more you fight the boss, the more you put into learning its moves and when to dodge, that it could help you defeat them. Then you absorb the knowledge of the boss and use what you've learned after fighting it many times to defeat it. Instead of fighting it over and over again and thinking that luck will be the one to defeat the boss, you quickly learn that that's not the case. So you go back, you die, but instead of getting mad, you reflect on what went wrong. I should have waited a little bit longer to attack. So you go back and get the boss to half health, which triggers its second phase, a feature that makes the boss stronger by giving it harder moves. You then die because you tried to heal, but the boss attacked you. I should have waited until there's an open window to heal. You go back for the final time and use everything you've learned to defeat the boss, and surprisingly, it goes perfectly. You make minimal slip-ups and finally defeat the boss. You feel confident to defeat every boss that stands in your way and reach further and further to facing the final boss. After hours of learning and fighting bosses, some harder than others, you find yourself where you thought you'd never be. You face the final boss, the Soul of Cinder. On the first attempts, you try to get a feel for their moves, finding windows to attack and windows to heal, or learning when to dodge certain attacks. Throughout the fight, he will occasionally switch weapons. Sometimes it's a spear, a katana, a staff, or a normal sword. These give him new moves that you have to learn. Learning each one of the weapons' moveset isn't easy, but you know by now that learning bosses isn't too hard. This all culminates in defeating the Soul of Cinder, and when you do, you learn a very valuable lesson. That persistence is the key to learning anything, especially something difficult. It teaches you that skill takes time, and with patience come rewards. What I like about Dark Souls is while being known by its difficulty, it's not defined by it. It uses it to teach you these same lessons. Just like any skill at life, a sport, or some other difficult hobby, you can't just be good at it right away. So many MVPs in various sports did not just magically get good at it. They had to spend hours and hours practicing and learning what they could do to improve their skills. And then they learn from their mistakes, and they see the improvements, and it serves as a reward to working hard. Dark Souls taught me about persistence, not only in the game, but in real life as well. That throwing yourself at something and expecting to be good at it by sheer luck is flawed logic, and that time and effort is the key to learning anything.